Welcome to r/slash Prorevenge, where a sexual assault victim gets her revenge. I was recently let go from my job as a store manager. The company I worked for was abusive to both me and my staff. Some examples, there are a lot more, would be the owners and upper management coming to the store and chasing the staff around while snapping their fingers and saying, "You're not working hard enough. Go, go, go." The owners/upper management coming to see the store and telling me how fat a certain employee is. The owners and upper management spreading rumors about the staff and I. The owners and upper management screaming at us over the phone loud enough that customers could hear it. A month or so before I was let go, I had a pay dispute wherein I explained bluntly, but professionally, how they need to pay me because it's the right thing to do. They'd promised extra pay above my salary for working hours I shouldn't have had to because of something they did, and then purposefully didn't pay me that money. Eventually they paid me, but they really didn't like that I stood up for myself and thus started their plan to get rid of me. One of them even stopped speaking to me altogether. After this, I was strangely given permission to hire a staff for the store. I needed one, so I happily posted an ad online and started interviewing people. It took a month, but I finally found one I liked and called the references, which came back average, but good enough. A sales rep I knew saw the resume on my desk and told me I should call X business, which wasn't on the resume. I did, and it turned out this person had been fired for theft of money and product in the same industry of which I'm hiring for. I decided not to hire the thief. A few days after deciding against the thief, I was forwarded a resume from the owner that had stopped speaking to me. It was instructing me to interview the thief I had decided against. But how did this owner get the thief's resume in their inbox? The ad was mine and forwarded only to my email, and only I had the password to the account. I followed the link back to an ad that I didn't write and posted from a different account. This ad was for a store manager. A poor attempt at being sneaky. I could have quit right then, but I had a better idea. The owners are notoriously spiteful, but I know they're also lazy and don't do their due diligence. They think they're having me hire my own replacement without me knowing. So I hired the thief as my employee, while the owners, having already seen the thief's resume, sees them as a good fit for the store manager. I vouched for the thief's references, knowing they'd never call them themselves. 3 weeks later, I was let go when I arrived at my store. The owners seemed confused by the big smile on my face when they told me. I was genuinely happy to be finished there. It was the worst employment experience of my life, but it was a job of necessity. I was able to collect employment insurance, thankfully. The thief took over managing the store. Thanks to the new store hours, the thief works 5 days a week with no staff, open to close, unsupervised. We have a similar story from Get Vonder down in the comments. I used to work in a now did discount retail chain. We had a regional manager responsible for 10 of the most profitable stores steal. He had an office in one of the 10 stores, and one night as he was leaving, he snagged a 1-pound bag of M&Ms off a product display that was probably too near the doors. At the time, probably worth about $3. The loss prevention manager for the store happened to be live watching the monitors. He immediately called the VP of loss prevention. The next morning, after a visit to a different store, the regional manager comes in and flips on the light to his office. The VP of loss prevention was sitting at his desk, waiting for him. He was allowed to resign and to keep the M&Ms. The VP of loss prevention paid for them himself. He was shown the video and was told that if he wanted to fight it, he'd be arrested for theft. He resigned and left. 25-year career. Salary in the $200K a year range, all flushed for a bag of M&Ms. Well, I really hope those M&Ms were worth it. Our next Reddit post is from theangrysquash. When I was a sophomore in high school, I was dating this guy. Let's call him Jack. He was this brooding guy in the Spanish class, and I was super into the whole mysterious, not talking to anyone, not caring vibe. Once we started dating, things were pretty cool. He was nice and funny, but he would make little comments all the time that just weren't okay. For example, I didn't like cursing back then. So when he would say frick, I would ask him to stop, and he would just say, "Why the frick should I freaking stop saying frick?" Over the next few months, things got worse and worse. He didn't want me talking to boys, which I accepted as him just being a jealous boyfriend. But then he didn't want me talking to girls either, because he thought I would badmouth him. When I talked to girls in front of him, he accused me of talking in code about him, even though I was only saying things like, "Oh, that test in math was hard, right?" Then came the emotional manipulation. When we would get into arguments, he would storm out of my house and cause scenes in front of my neighbors, forcing me to just agree to whatever he wanted so that he would stop making me look bad in front of others. He would say things like, "Oh, if you loved me, you would do this." One time, I tried to break up with him and he ran to my house 10 miles away to make sure that I felt guilty enough to stay with him. Not long after all of this came the physical stuff. He would throw things, hit me, he even punched a hole in my wall. That was fun trying to come up with an explanation for my parents. 10 months after we started dating, I finally ended it after he sexually assaulted me. I told my parents everything, and they made sure that I was able to break up with him without him guilting me into backing out. What I didn't realize was that during the sexual assault, he'd taken pictures. The next day at school, he threatened to show them to everyone. His friends, my friend, my parents, teachers, college admissions, everyone. I told one of my rather intimidating friends about it, and she made sure to put a stop to that. She ended up hunting him down, beating the bejesus out of him, and forcing him to delete the pics. She was the best, and I made sure to buy her a burger for that. He'd also lent me his graphing calculator for algebra. You know, the ones that cost like $200. He told me that he didn't want it back, but that he wanted the money to buy a new one. He also wanted $500 for all the pizzas, dinners, etc. that he'd bought me over our relationship. I said F that, bagged up all the stuff he'd lent me and put it in his locker. When I got home that night, the bag was sitting on my front porch. I ended up driving to his house and giving the stuff to his parents, making sure to explain that while he bought me food, I also bought him food, so I didn't owe him anything. All of this is a long-winded way to say that that guy sucked. Fast forward about a year. I was in therapy, taking medicine, and doing much better after the entire ordeal. I hadn't spoken to him at all, and things were great. Then I got a call from him. Now, Jack's dream was to join the Marines. He'd been training with a Marine recruiter for nearly 2 years, getting in shape, making sure he was up to standard to join. As much as I hated him, I have to admit that he worked his butt off for that. When Jack called me, he asked me to be a character reference for him. Why he asked me, I have no freaking idea. After all the stuff he did, you'd think he would have wanted me as far away from the recruiting people as possible. Nonetheless, he asked. So I did what any good friend would do, and I told him, sure, I'd be happy to be your reference. He said great and told me the stuff to say once the recruiting officer called. Stuff like, Jack's an upstanding person, very loyal, very strong, very hardworking, a great guy to have in the Marines. I said no problem and hung up. 2 weeks later, I got the call. Sergeant whatever asked me a couple of questions like how did I know Jack? Did I think he would be a good fit for the Marines? What kind of person he was, etc. You better believe that I told that guy everything. I told him about the emotional manipulation, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, all of it, in painstaking detail. The sergeant was pretty quiet throughout all of this, just listening, jotting everything down, I imagine. At the end of the call, he said, "Thank you for telling me all of this. I'll be honest, that's not what I was expecting to hear. But I appreciate your honesty. That's not the kind of person we want in the Marines." I agreed with him on that point, and we hung up. Never talked to Jack again after that. Last I heard, he's working at McDonald's, still in our podunk hometown. I guess my character reference didn't help him get to the Marines. Whoops. Who should I include as a character reference? I know, that girl I abused and sexually assaulted. Honestly, this guy had it coming. Our next Reddit post is from jamesjaceable. So, I like to bring my food into the office and we have a fridge to put things into. And I have my food in tubs with my name on them. A coworker would sometimes not see people's names on food and think it was theirs, so would heat it up and eat it and then apologize. They did this enough for it to be an annoyance, but not enough for our employers to really care. This has been happening with my food for once or twice a month. Last month, I had enough and I like spicy food. But don't bring it into the office, as sometimes I'll let people try some of my food in my cooking. I ordered a bag of ghost chili peppers and put the full bag into a big pot of chili that would last for several days. I took this into the office and had it for lunch every day. Midweek, my lunch went missing, and I was waiting for the person who was stealing my lunch to get a shock when they ate my lunch. What happened in reality was someone got sent home sick, and the next day they were off, and I was told they went to the doctor for stomach pains. 2 weeks went by, and the coworker who was off refused to talk about it and said HR was involved. So I knew they were going to try to get me fired. I went home and ordered another bag of ghost chilies and made another batch of my chili, this time with only one chili in a single tub. I put this in the freezer, and the following Monday, I was told I had an HR meeting that day. I refused and said they need to give me 24 hours to find someone to come into the meeting with me. And the next day, I had my manager come into the meeting and brought in my now heated ghost chili infused chili. The long and short is, I was told I could be fired for trying to poison the person who was stealing my lunch. And I asked if they admitted to stealing people's lunch, which they did. I then said I have the batch of chili in question with me, and I like spicy food. My liking spicy food shouldn't stop me from having it at work, since it doesn't smell when heated, like fish. And my manager agreed it was on the person who took my lunch without knowing how spicy it was. And I shouldn't be held liable if they eat something of someone else's that doesn't agree with them. My manager and I then ate some of the chili and offered it to the people in the meeting, some of which tried it and agreed that while it was spicy, it was clearly what I liked, as I was fine eating it. The meeting ended and nothing happened. I wasn't taken into another meeting and my lunch wasn't taken anymore. But the person who had stole our lunch got a slap on the wrist and was allowed to stay at work. Lunches started going missing again, so my manager went to HR to say that lunches were going missing, and he knew who was taking it and had proof this time. And when they asked for the proof, he presented the meeting record with the line highlighted where they admitted they had stolen lunch, and the line where HR said that this was not what the meeting was about. They were fired the next day for theft of property and told they would not be given a reference. Then we had this contribution from PJ Murphy down in the comments. Years ago, I was a dispatcher for a trucking company. Lunches were going missing. A coworker suffered from a condition of his digestive system that required frequent colonoscopies. As a result, he had access to some pretty powerful laxatives. He spiked his lunch. Sure enough, it went missing. There's a stretch of highway called the 401, and the guy who swiped the lunch was a truck driver. Here's the thing. The distance between exits on that highway is considerable. I guess he didn't make it, as word got around the terminal that the driver basically pooed all over the cab and had to pay for the cleanup. It looks like in this case, the punishment fits the crime. Our next Reddit post is from CountMountjoy. My nephew, Bob, had a job selling cell phones at a store in the mall. The store was owned by a licensed distributor of one of the big name brands. He was very good at convincing customers to buy calling plans, extended warranties, and accessories that were obscenely profitable. Pretty soon, he was the #1 salesman in the store. The owners asked him to transfer to their other store in a different mall, replacing the assistant manager who they had just fired. In addition to an increase in his base pay, he'd get a cut of every sale made while he was in charge. It took him about 2 days to figure out why sales were down. Clueless sales reps and lousy management. The manager would disappear for hours at a time, leaving the sales rep to sit around ignoring customers. Most of them would show up late, leave early, or not bother coming in at all. And when they did speak to a customer, they had no idea how to make a sale. On his first day, he outsold them all. After making sure the guys on his shift were actually doing their jobs, especially when it came to selling the high-profit add-ons, the store sales improved. The store manager saw what was happening and wasn't too happy. He knew it was a matter of time before he was kicked out, and Bob took his job. One day, they received a shipment of new phones. As usual, Bob signed for them and locked them in the storage closet. The next day was his day off. The manager called and insisted he come in immediately because there was a problem. Overnight, someone had broken into the store and stolen about 100 of these brand new phones. The mall security camera showed two people driving up to the back door, opening it with a key, shutting off the alarm, and walking out with the phones. The police were called. He was grilled by the police for a couple of hours, but they had no evidence against him, and he had an alibi. But the manager convinced the owners that Bob was probably involved since he had signed for the phones, had keys to the door and storage closet, and knew the alarm code. Bob argued that they hadn't changed the locks or code after they fired the previous assistant manager, and anyone could know about the shipment. But he was fired. Actually, they allowed him to resign, and they stiffed him on his last commission check. At the other end of the mall was a store that sold phones for one of the competing cell companies. They knew that since he had joined that other store, their sales were suffering. They hired him on the spot. Sales improved overnight. One of his favorite tricks was to stand in front of the store and wait for a customer to walk by carrying a shopping bag from that other store. He'd chat them up about their brand new phone, calling plan, warranty, etc. It's amazing how much the average mall shopper is willing to share with a stranger. Then he'd tell them that they probably didn't need the extended warranty, and those accessories could be purchased at Walmart for about half the price. And he could sell them the exact phone with better plan for less money. If they agreed, he would walk them back to the other store and tell the clueless sales rep how to avoid the sale he just made. Then bring the customer back to his store to pick up their new phone. It took about 3 months before that other store closed its doors. That was r/Prorevenge, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button because it really helps my channel grow. Also, don't forget to subscribe because I put out new Reddit videos every single day.